So maybe it's me, maybe I'm missing something, but it feels like the deals that keep being presented to Ukraine keep getting worse. My name is Darren Gerdes. I'm just a professor. I'm trying to help you understand context in the war in Ukraine. It is Friday, April 25th, 2025. And these are three big stories. So the first is about the peace deal that's being unraveled or unveiled right now. Unraveled is probably a good word too, given what's happened or not happened. So let's go back just a day or two. So Trump on Russia's deadly attack on Kyiv. We're in the midst of talking peace and missiles were fired. I wasn't happy about it. So a reporter asks him this.
Social post, you use the words Vladimir, stop. That seemed like a slightly different message, a personal message. What is your level of frustration with President Putin
I didn't like
at this
last
point?
night. I wasn't happy with it. And we're in the midst of talking peace and missiles were fired. And I was not happy with it. That's what I meant. And that's, what it said. I assume that's what you mean.
Sorry,
Yeah.
if the bombs keep falling, will you consider additional sanctions toward Russia, or what will you do if President Putin does not respond?
I'd rather answer that question in a week. I want to see if we can have a deal.
He's not actually going to say anything that he's going to do. Okay. So then there was a meeting between Putin and Trump's special envoy, Witkoff. It's just began as this was being posted. And so it went for about 3 hours. And here Steve Witkoff left the meeting. Russian media report his meeting lasted for 3 hours and they're on their way out. So what'd they talk about? Okay. Whatever it was. Okay, America's selling a Ukraine peace plan, but no one's buying it. That's the headline here. And we look at like some of the documents arising from the recent negotiations showed there's a huge gap between Trump's team's demands and what Kyiv's leadership is willing to consider. And the Russians aren't even willing to consider things. And it's the same thing. Ukraine won't give up any territory, full stop. Okay, Russia won't give up any territory, full stop. But Ukraine keeps getting blamed for this where Russia's not. It's a really bizarre thing to watch. Okay, now here is Anton Goroshenko talking about how Reuters published the full text of Trump's peace plan. The proposals are as follows. 1, permanent ceasefire along the front line. I'm not so sure I'm crazy about that because that means that Russia's kind of keeping that. U.S. de jure recognizes Russian control of Crimea and de facto recognize other Russian territorial seizures in Ukraine. Not sure I'm crazy about that either. That means Russia essentially gets to keep it. Ukraine will not seek to join NATO. I don't like that one. That's why they're in this problem to begin with. Ukraine retains control of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant through U.S. control and administration. I mean... okay. I mean, it's not exciting. It makes me yawn, but okay. I mean, I wouldn't call this a win. I would call this neutral at best. Ukraine retains territory in the Kharkiv region. Wait. They're not going to recognize, hold on. Russia gets to keep all its territory and you get to get this area around. Here's Kharkiv. You get this territory back. Is that what I'm seeing? This little tiny bits of land around Kharkiv, they get that back, and you have to recognize that Russia gets the rest of. Is that what's being said? Unhindered passage for Ukrainian ships on the Dnieper River within Ukraine, which is their territory. Okay. I mean, no wonder they can't make a deal. This is the most tone-deaf deal I've seen. Wow. Okay. Ukraine's position. Ukraine will not recognize Crimea as well as other parts of the territory as Russian. Ukraine will not accept restrictions on its armed forces and defense industry or military aid from partners. Like, you can't restrict us and say we have to disarm or not join any blocs that would have us. And Ukraine will not accept a veto on its participation in alliances and unions like the EU or NATO. So like they're miles apart. And Trump keeps talking about, yeah, you're right on the cusp of a deal. It's just about to happen. We're really close. We're having a lot of good talks. I'm not seeing it. Okay, Trump calls Russia to offer, Trump calls Russia's offer to stop the war and not gobble up all of Ukraine a huge concession. Well, what concessions is Russia going to make? It's a good question. It's a legit
A lot
question.
of pressure on both. If you think we're just in there because we're nice people, and we are nice people, but we're using a lot of pressure on both.
What concessions, Mr. President, and to your national security team, what concessions has Russia offered up thus far to get to the point where you're closer to peace?
Stopping the war.
Stopping the war. That's their concession. This is like ridiculous negotiating.
Taking the whole country. Pretty big concession.
But if they could take the whole country, they would have taken the whole country. Like, Ukraine has stopped them from doing that. So what else are they going to concede? Because so far it's all been Ukraine must concede this, Ukraine must concede that. Now, Lavrov was being interviewed, and he said, Lavrov is the way it's supposed to be pronounced. I've pronounced it wrong for years. President Trump is probably the only leader on earth who recognizes the need to address the root causes of this situation, which he explains is NATO. NATO is the root cause of this situation. It's not. The root cause of the situation is probably more like this. This is a Russian propagandist saying that Russia decided that Odessa is our territory. It goes ahead and it does what it needs to. If you don't agree, die. That is the root cause. It's the Russian imperialist mindset. In fact, I'm just starting to read Alexander Dugin's Foundations of Geopolitics. And yes, this is the problem. It's the mindset within Russia that they still need to be an empire, and they have a right to be an empire. That's the root cause. Ukraine seeks peace, but not at the cost of its sovereignty. President Zelensky has reaffirmed that no peace terms can violate the Constitution or Ukrainian law. Ukraine is ready for negotiations, but only after a full, unconditional ceasefire. Kyiv demonstrated its willingness on March 11th. The Russians haven't. So, again, what Trump said he was going to do was he was going to give Ukraine lots of arms to bring Russia to the table, and he hasn't been willing to do that. President Trump hints now that Washington may exit Ukraine talks in 2 weeks if a ceasefire isn't reached. Ukraine is preparing for the worst-case scenario, which includes the end of U.S. support, according to Bild, a German publication. Okay, here's an excerpt from President Trump's interview with Time magazine. Okay, do you think peace is possible if Putin is president? Answer, I think peace is possible. You say if Putin is still president? Yeah, if Putin is president, can there be peace if Putin is president of Russia? Answer, I think with me as president, it's possible. It's very probable. If somebody else is president, no chance. If Putin can make a deal, yes, I think Putin will. And I think because of me, I believe I'm the only one that can get this thing negotiated. Question, do you believe that peace is possible if Zelensky is still president of Ukraine? Yeah, I do. Question, Ukraine gave up any hope of ever joining NATO, or should Ukraine give up any hope of ever joining NATO? Answer, I don't think they'll ever be able to join NATO. I think that's been from day one. I think that's what's caused the war from the start. So his answer is the same as Lavrov's answer, and wow. Okay. Question, should Crimea go to the Russians? Should they get to keep Crimea? Answer, well, Crimea went to the Russians. It was handed to them by Barack Hussein Obama. Another thing that the Russians would answer that way. Question, would it be acceptable to you in a deal if Crimea and the 4 other regions that Russia has taken from Ukraine would be folded into Russia under a final accommodation? Answer, if Crimea will stay with Russia, we have only to talk about Crimea because that's the only one that always gets mentioned. Crimea will stay with Russia, and Zelensky understands that, and everybody understands that it's been with them for a long time. No, Zelensky doesn't understand that. Zelensky is not just rolling over and going, okay, Crimea's lost, you get it. He's not saying that at all. Question, you've talked about improving relations with Moscow. Are you pursuing negotiations with them on issues other than Ukraine? No, but if a deal has happened, I can see us doing business with Ukraine and Russia as a country. Okay. That's where Trump is as he's giving his interview. Most of those positions are just simply Russian positions. Now, there's a number of conservatives that are coming out to defend Ukraine here. Boris Johnson, but he's always been defending, right? Putin must pay. It's unthinkable to give him a bailout. So Boris is still solidly behind Ukraine. Mike Pence, he's been full-throatedly behind Ukraine as well. Following last night's brutal assault on Kyiv, this is yesterday he put this out, it's clear that Putin has no interest in peace. Time to answer Russia's ongoing invasion in Ukraine with renewed American strength and give our ally the military support that they need to win a victory for freedom. Okay. Then we see Newt Gingrich. I haven't seen much of Newt Gingrich saying this kind of thing. If you don't know who Newt Gingrich is, he was the Speaker of the House during the Clinton administration. He was the Republican Speaker of the House, the opposition to Bill Clinton. He says this: it's clear from Putin's attack on Kyiv that he still does not believe that there are any negative consequences for continuing the war. The West has not yet convinced the Russian dictator that the alternative to a ceasefire is a lot greater threat to his regime. Until he fears that there is a serious consequence, he will continue lying and fighting with stunning cynicism. All right. Go Newt. What we need is more of these voices to counterbalance what Trump's doing and push the momentum back the other direction. Okay. Now the Trump administration is doing some weird things here. Trump administration shared its Vladimir stop message via this is the tweet, Vladimir stop doing this, via its embassy's account in Kyiv. The account of the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, completely silent. You won't find any Vladimir stop messages there. The Trump administration didn't even dare to irritate Putin through official U.S. government institutions in Russia, like the American embassy in Russia. Like, wrap that around your mind. Okay. Now, this is Trump, and I'll show you Trump and Rubio talking about this. We showed them the finish line, says U.S. Secretary of State Rubio, as he urges Ukraine to accept peace talks with Russia. On what terms exactly? These are terrible terms, but here's Rubio talking. Well, Trump.
Well, first of all, what was put before our partners was options to discuss about things that it would take to end a war. This war is endable. Both sides just have to agree to it. We've shown them a pathway forward. We've discussed those ideas. It was a good meeting yesterday. There'll be good meetings over the week.
No, the pathway forward that you proposed is absolutely terrible for Ukraine. And that you can't see this is utter tone deafness.
And we've shown them the finish line. We need both of them to say yes. But what happened last night with those missile strikes should remind everybody of why this war needs to end. It's horrible those missiles landed. What's even worse is there are today people that were alive yesterday that are not alive today, because this war continues.
Now, that's a fair point, except it's keeping him, he's using this, and this is the Trump administration's line. Hey, we just want this killing to end. We want people to not die. That's fair, but you still aren't naming the aggressor. So let's agree with Lavrov. You got to get to the foundations of why this started. The foundations of why this started are that Russians are aggressing against Ukraine. That's what we need to understand, and they're not saying it.
The president wants to stop it, and everyone should be thanking the president for being a peacemaker and trying to save lives. That's what we're trying to do here. It's not our war. We didn't start it, as you know. But we're trying to end the dying. We're trying to end the destruction.
Okay, this is a pretty bad look for Rubio, who in his bones has been historically anti-Russia, anti-communism all the way through, that sort of thing. And what's happened to him? Now, he's in the administration. Mercifully, Haley is out of the administration. Now, this is partly because Trump just doesn't like her because she ran against him. But I think that's actually politically a good thing. In the next election cycle, we're going to have a Trumpian candidate, or I'm sorry, a MAGA-like candidate. I'm not sure who that's going to be. It will not be Donald Trump. Maybe it'll be Donald Trump Jr. Maybe it'll be J.D. Vance. And my hope was that Rubio would be the opposition that's more conservative. I'm not necessarily seeing that. But Haley's still out there, and Haley is been full-throatedly supporting Ukraine. Listen to what she has to say.
But at the end of the day, aggressors do what aggressors do.
Mm-hmm.
If we allow this Russian aggression to be rewarded, they will do it again. It's what he does. If he sees he gains land and is not punished for it, he will do it again. If we punish Ukraine for trying to protect themselves, what are you saying to freedom-loving countries everywhere? There are only certain times that we can look back and say, we have to know the difference between right and wrong. This is one of those times.
That's right. That's spot on. Now, so in the future, you'll be looking to perhaps Rubio, but I don't see him. I mean, he's changed his language, or maybe Haley. Okay. This is interesting. Russian losses versus Ukrainian land occupied. Someone show Trump this graph. Russia agreeing to not take the whole country as their only concession is ridiculous. For all their effort, they have never gone back to the amount of land that they held since October 2022. Now, because this graph is so condensed, it doesn't look like much. This is actually ticking up a little bit at the end. You just can't tell because of how condensed the chart is. But still, the contrast between how flat comparatively this looks, it's slightly going up as opposed to how the Russian troops killed and wounded is going up. Yeah, it's no contest. All right, I only have just a little bit left here. I was hesitating to show you. Yeah, I'm just going to leave that alone. Okay, Trump told me to stop it, says Darth Putin. Wonder why he didn't think of that sooner. Well, that's a good thought. All right, my friends, that's all that I have for you right now with the 3 big stories. Thank you for the time, the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.